Hello and welcome to The Print. I am Ratan Priya, and today we have with us Manil Suri, acclaimed author and mathematician. And today we are going to talk about his new book, which is A Room in Bombay. Hi Manil, really nice to meet you. Could you
Hi,
talk
great to
about
meet
your
you.
book a little to our viewers?
Yeah, so this is a book that started a long time ago, and I worked on it off and on for many years. And it's about my growing up in a apartment in Bombay. I call it Bombay because back then in the 60s, that's what the name was. And of course, now it's Mumbai. But I grew up in a single room that was part of a large apartment, large flat, and we were paying guests. And the interesting thing was that we were Hindu, and the other three families that lived in the other rooms were all Muslim. So we shared a couple of bathrooms with them, and we also had a kitchen that we shared with them. And there were lots of fights and hostilities and so on. And my parents were, and I were kind of stuck in this room. It was both a refuge from everything outside, but also a prison in a way, especially once I started realizing that I might be gay. And then the story is really about how I broke out of there, how I tried to help my parents also get out, and what happened to the room as Bombay's real estate prices kept going up and up.
As someone who has read the book, I would say this book talks about religion, queerness, the state of real estate in India, and how it became better, but also in a way not really. And but I think that this book is really about your mom, because she is you as you read through, you see her grow up. You see, I mean, a reader also sees you grow up, but we also see her grow old. And there's nothing else stands more than Prem Suri.
Yes,
Would you agree?
exactly. Exactly. So there's so many strands in the book, and one by one, all the strands kind of fall off. So at the end, it's just my mother and myself that are left. And my mother, like, I think this is something that many people face, their aging parents. My
Yeah.
mother got sick. She started having dementia. So how do I take care of her sitting in the US, and whereas she is over here? So that was a central dilemma. And you're right about my mother's life being also in parallel, looking at that through this book.
When you said that it has been some years that the book has been in the works, when did you start writing it?
I think I started it in about 2010, and I wrote the first chapter, which is quite long, as a standalone story. I thought I would just publish that. And then it was just too long, so I couldn't really do that. So then someone suggested maybe this is the start of a book. And I didn't really want to necessarily write a memoir because, I've written three novels, and that's what I wanted to do. So many years later, my mother, actually around that same time, my mother gave me all these letters that I had written to her, which in all totaled about 2,700 letters. And I
Speaking
just,
of the letters, I would
yeah,
like to inform our viewers that one introduction that is very essential to this book and Manil is that he is a holder of a Limca book record. He was declared the son who had sent the most number of letters to his mom. How many letters was it? Would you like to tell our viewers?
yeah, in the Limca book, I think it's a little less because that was in 2002 that or three,
It's still 2001.
2001. So I can't
Yeah.
remember what the that amount was at that time, but the total correspondence was over 2,700 letters from me to her. And
And you don't
and
even speak to our moms for 5 minutes on call.
yeah, right. But my mother actually counted all the words in the letters.
It was
And
some 1 lakh or something, and she said, "How many books is that?"
Yeah, but in all, it was 1.5 million.
Oh
So
my.
it was 15 lakhs. So
You could just publish a book with just like a compilation of all those letters, like.
but the letters aren't very good though. They're not they're not like Naipaul's letters or something like that. They're just ordinary letters like I went to the market, I did this, I saw this movie, I saw that. They're not, things that have high literature in them. So they're
But
just
if you think about it, if like I was reading letters to Milena, and Kafka is writing about his constipation and stuff like that. So I guess it
okay.
is it is
I'll,
what it
I'll I'll pick out all the ones that in which I
is.
talk about my constipation, which there are many, I think.
So, ho- see, Virginia Woolf said that a woman needs a room for herself to write. And
Mhm.
when you think about that concept in your case, uh, like they say, the girls and the gays are not very different. You did not have a room. How old were you when you realized that the writer in you needed that space? Did you, because you don't talk about your writing journey
Mhm. Right.
in the entirety of your book. How did you find a solitude to put stuff to paper when you were
So
living with your parents?
right. So it was very much, since it was just one room, whatever I did, I had to somehow create this mental barrier around me. And my parents were very supportive of that. So they'd be very careful whether I was studying or whether I was making some painting or if I was writing some. I used to write some small stories, sometimes a poem or two, something funny maybe, but they were not ambitious writings. They were
Hmm.
not, I'm a writer type writings. They were just like scribbles and fun stuff. And then when I went to the US, then I had more space because now I was by myself. And that's when the idea came to me, let me try writing a short story. And so I wrote a two-page short story called Unfulfilled Expectations. And if you read it, you'd be wondering whose expectations were unfulfilled. And it turned out it was the viewer, the reader, whose expectations were unfulfilled. And so it was a little, almost a mathematical twist to it.
How did your mom took to your writing? What did she say?
Yeah, she just loved it. She loved everything. Well, not everything. So when I was writing my first novel, she loved the first chapter. It was very funny. And so then I sent her another chapter, and she said, "Beta, that first chapter was so funny. What happened?" So I knew that I had to make the rest of the book really funny because I had this one reader, and if I couldn't even take care of her, then that's pretty
Yeah,
bad as a writer. So she was very helpful in terms of that first novel. I would send her pieces, and she would kind of tell me if she thought them funny or not.
that's wonderful. I also wanted to know, when did you realize that that room was a metaphor for your life story?
That's a good question because that happened after I'd finished the book. Everyone started suddenly, everyone who read it said, "Oh yeah, it's a metaphor, it's a metaphor, it's a metaphor." And I thought to myself, I lived through it and it didn't feel like a metaphor. So it's only now that I'm thinking, oh yeah, it was really like the room was a closet, like a gay for gays. It was
Yeah,
a place that kept my parents from really living their lives.
yeah.
But it was also nurturing in some ways. It brought us very close together. So that was also interesting.
You talk about how this architecture and urban life was affecting your freedom of sexuality. You were not able to express yourselves in a way. What do you how do you think for queer people it is a problem, since people who have not read the book wouldn't know? So would you like to tell
So you mean like the fact
the,
that,
the life? How is that restricting for queer people?
well, in Mumbai especially, everything is so crowded.
Hmm.
You don't have any privacy, and so it's very hard to really explore your sexuality. When I was growing up, it was even worse because there was just no mention of it. Like if you read the Times of India for 20 years, you would maybe
Mm,
find one story in the whole of 20 years talking about anything related. So there was
mm,
this vacuum. But what you're asking is really about the fact that now it's a little better. People have their own apartments, maybe, or flats, but most people still live with their parents. And the question is, if you really want to have a relationship with someone, how do you do it?
yeah.
So that's still an ongoing problem, I feel.
Also, see, Indian men talk about, how they are always burdened with their parents' responsibility,
Mhm.
and but then as a queer son, how was it different? How is it an Indian son's responsibilities and expectations and the burden different from a queer son's?
Well, so I think the usual model is that if you're straight, you're going to marry somebody. And for a son, especially, that helps having a partner who's going to give you children, perhaps, and then the parents can come and stay with you even and take care of the grandchildren. So
Yeah.
that's the usual model. And if you're queer, then that kind of breaks down. I mean, of course, people have kids too, queer people, but in my generation we kind of didn't. And so it was very interesting. There's a scene in the book where my mother is at a beauty salon in Mumbai. This is years after she's come to the U.S. and she's gone back, and the hairstylist asks her, "Well, why don't you go live in the U.S.?" And she very loudly, she was a school teacher, so she loudly says, "Well, I had only one son and he didn't even get married, so I went there, but I had to come back." And
Mm,
all the women are kind of, listening, and their ears are twitching and everything. And then the woman said, "Well, why don't we just get her married now?" And she said, "Now, who's going to marry him now? He's 50." And
mm,
then she said, the stylist said, "Okay, that's okay. We'll still find a good girl for him." And my mother said, "Girls, he loves boys." She said this in the beauty salon, and everyone stopped talking, and they were trying not to meet my eye. And all I could think of was how nice it is to be a writer, because someday I'd be able to use this in a book. So I did.
mm. And you told her that you guys were having a conversation and you said, I'm going to save this for my book.
Yes,
And yeah, and she
I
dared
told
you.
her, and she said, "Okay, as long as I'm gone, I don't care what you write about me." So I had that permission.
Hmm. You obviously you love your mom, that comes through in every chapter, every page, but you also talk about a lot of guilt that you suffered through, and you keep mentioning how you were responsible for her happiness. That living with that must have come at a mental cost. How were you dealing with it? Were you like into therapy, or what were you doing? Were you just writing it away?
Well, I think in terms of guilt, it's something that you have to really find a way to counteract it, or to say, "Okay, I'm just going to feel guilty for this much time or this amount, and beyond that, I'm going to train myself not to think about it." That's of course
Mm.
very hard to do in the Indian context, especially because I mentioned some things in the book, like the
The
Ramayana,
Shravan Kumar.
Shravan Kumar, and the Mahabharata. They're all based on this idea that the
And
parents
you
are.
also say that you failed as the Shravan in the Shravan Kumar test.
Yes, so the Shravan Kumar is, he was somebody whose parents were blind, and he used to carry them around on these two baskets that were slung over his shoulder, and he died while trying to find them water. So that's the level that, people have to aspire to, which is, of course, impossible. So at some point, you have to realize,
Even Shravan Kumar failed the Shravan Kumar test.
well, in a way, but he died, so he's absolved from that. But
Okay.
but yeah, it's something that you'll always find people who are doing more for their parents. But I also found people that were doing a lot less. People, some cases where they just, parents fall sick and they just abandon them.
Also,
So
you were living in America and the family system is completely different there. So I'm sure your friends must be like, you know, they were having different opinions about your family situations, and how were you able to, differentiate? I'm sure someone must have told you to, think about your own happiness
yes,
and all.
absolutely.
How did you, no, but this is my reality. This is where I come from, and this is what I owe them, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a good word that you use. This is what I owe them. This is
Yeah.
something that they are the ones responsible for what I am. I mean, they're the ones who, nurtured me. So I have to, it's only fair, give and take. And on a purely, not mercenary, but business-like transaction, this is what's owed to them. But it's more than that. I think it's more emotional than,
Yeah.
strictly logical.
How were you able to draw the boundaries that you were able to draw? You did draw a lot of boundaries subtly, when you needed your space, when you wanted her to be more, accepting of your sexuality, not just in the way that she was being. How were you able to draw those boundaries, and how do you think other people can also,
Well, that's a good question. To me,
while loving their parents?
right. Well, the problem is that in India, especially like mothers, they have very, very few boundaries. I mean, they'll, their sons are everything. So like my mother merrily read my diaries that when I went away, they all were covered in do not read, and I'd put plastic around them, but she just went through and just read them and found out that I was gay that way. Uh,
Yeah.
so in that kind of situation, the boundary for me was much easier just because I wasn't there. I wasn't in India. So just being abroad, I could really decide how much to, how much I wanted to disclose to them, how much of myself I wanted to give to them. So that helped a lot.
Do you think you were able to make up for the disappointments that she had in life? Because you write it at one place that, making up for those disappointments, you thought it was your responsibility. Do you think you were able to, or was it like a futile pursuit? I mean, you can try, but you won't be able to.
So my mother came to stay. My mother, once she had a little bit of dementia, she came to stay with us, my partner and myself, and she stayed here for about 7 months with the idea that she might continue here. But then we found a place in India that took
Yeah.
her back. And so before she left, she said that I have to tell you something. And I said, no, because it's going to be too emotional. And what she said was that I never expected that I would get to spend these 7 months with you at this time of my life. And that it really made up for a lot of the disappointments that you mentioned. That, it was like a period in her life that really filled her with
Yeah.
fulfillment. So I feel that that's something I always carry around with me. That okay, I did this, and that was something she really appreciated.
And that's such a validating thing to hear from your parents,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Also, religion is it's a big theme in the book, and you have seen it go from this to that. When you talk about how the Hindi bhajans used to sound like kavalis, they
Right.
started sounding like something else only. And how do you think the way your family and all these three families coexisted, even though, I mean, there were clashes, but they were still living together for
Mhm.
so long? Is it possible in today's India?
I think it should be. I mean, in the sense that I know that things have become much more balkanized almost with, there are Hindu sections in Bombay and Muslim sections. But
Yeah.
I think this is an example where all these families with two different religions are just living in very close quarters and sharing bathrooms and kitchens, which again it wasn't so much religion that was the friction. It was
They
just
hate each other for the space that they
yeah,
occupy.
exactly. The space, so it's always the resources. So when you look at a lot of these clashes between religions, it's something else. It's not really religion, it's finances or resources. And so I think if people realize that and come to agreements, there is hope. But I do agree that things have become worse since that time.
Hmm. It has, yeah. And the thought of three Muslim families living with one Hindu family, I mean, it's a headline in itself right now.
Yeah, even back then, people in Delhi thought that this would never happen there. That
Yeah.
Bombay, Mumbai had a unique cosmopolitan spirit that allowed such arrangements to flourish.
Hmm.
So, and because my cousins would tell me, well, you used to play cards with Muslims and this and that, and we would never do that. And
Hmm.
it's not like active discrimination or anything. It's just that their spheres just were all, people through the temple or whatever. And similarly for the Muslims. So I think, this is, it's a great example. We fought and everything, but we coexisted till the end. So
Yeah.
so in that, it's a very positive example.
It is. Also, my next question is: since you've written novels so far, and this was your first nonfiction work, what were the elements of fiction that you ended up using while telling your own story?
I think the novel aspect is so strong that this really reads like a novel.
It
And
is. It does.
the
It could
book,
actually become a Netflix special, you know.
right? Okay, well, just talk to them, make them read it. Absolutely. Uh, so I'm too old to play myself, but we'll get some new great Bollywood
Yeah,
star to do
you
it.
get a tweak.
Yeah, anyone. Yeah. So the novel aspect is very strong in this book, and it was even stronger in the first draft. And then my editor kept telling me, "Okay, this is a memoir." In the
Hmm.
first draft, I was just like a fly on the wall, not really participating so much, not really putting myself into the story, just looking at events. And the
Yeah.
reason I did that is that it is a very strong story, with the apartment, what's going to happen to my mother. My editor made me really, delve into that, put myself in there, like, what are you thinking? Explain it to the reader. And
Hmm.
that helped turn it into more of a memoir, but it still reads like a novel, I think.
So you did use the elements of fiction writing for telling the non-fiction part as well.
Absolutely. I think if you look at a lot of my books, they're always occurring. There's action at different levels. Like the first one was about the death of Vishnu, was about
Hmm.
Vishnu, he's dying. So you keep seeing chapters about him, and then you see chapters about the people who are taking care of him, this alternation. And so that helped a lot here, that idea, because I was in the US and my story was going on there. And then my
Yeah.
parents were here and their story was going on.
Since you are also a mathematician, I mean, I know because I've read that, but how did you bring order to your work as a mathematician, this book?
So I think we were mentioning this idea of the threads, like the
Yes.
different pieces that were actually joined together. And at some point, my editor was kind of upset, and she thought that the book didn't work because she said that this is only about your mother and you, and we should try to really get rid of everything else. And
Hmm.
so the challenge was to convince her that this is not, the standard memoir. And so what I did was, and this was the mathematical part, I said, let's try to visualize this book in a way that will show how these different stories are connected and how they make each other stronger, how they resonate with each other. And so I created this, what I called a book X-ray, where I showed, okay, these are the chapters where each of these strands is active. Like one of the strands was the story of me and my mother, me and my father, the apartment, and then me and my queerness. So there's like 4 or 5 strands. And once you see this, you can see that all of these strands are helping each other. And then at the end, there's only the mother-son strand that's left. So I think that was able to convince my editor that okay, this has a different structure from the standard one. So I think
How many drafts was it? Was it two or more than that?
so. Okay, so it was once the first draft was done, then it was about the first draft was about 150,000 words. My editor said that's too much. We need to pare it down. So the next draft was about 130,000 words. And there was a third draft where it was about 100,000. And finally, it was like 92,000. So it just went on and on. And I was
Hmm.
not just cutting, but also putting different things in there. So it was really, it took more than a year just to edit it.
What does Larry think of this?
So Larry, I had to show it to him before I showed it to anyone else, and I
Yeah.
said, "You need to approve everything. I've put you in there. I've put words in your mouth. Are you okay with that?" And so he read it very carefully, and he said he gave me the okay. So that was very necessary, and he liked it. He thought it was very touching, especially with my mother. He really got to know her and to have a lot of affection for her. So when she went back after staying with us for 7 months, he was also like, "My God, the whole place is empty." Um, and so he enjoyed the book a lot. The other person who's mentioned there is Sunila, my cousin.
Yeah.
And what I did was I gave the book to her son. And I said, okay, you need to tell me if your mother is okay with all of this. Because she didn't want to read the whole book. So,
Uh,
so they figured it out and they approved it as well. So, yeah, everyone has said yes.
it must be like really tricky to write about people who would read it, because sometimes when I write something and there are real people mentioned, I'm always wondering, am I remembering it correctly? Am I is there, everybody has like a perception of what happened. A lot of times I sort of end up embellishing stories. But then when you write about real people, what do you think are the like key things that you have to be careful about? One thing is that you have to make them read it, and you have to make them tell you that they are okay with it. While writing, what are the things that you were careful about?
So I had to really think, because some of these people, like my mother, is no longer there to defend herself, and
Yeah.
other people might read it and then question, and that's happened actually already because it's a minor character, Mary, and I said that she told me that everyone is responsible for their own life, and she liked the book. Just sent me a message yesterday and saying, "Well, I didn't quite say that, or I didn't quite mean that," and you're gonna get that kind of thing.
Hmm.
I was kind of fortunate because I was writing journals down. So some of the language that I got was purely taken from those journals, which had recorded what people had actually said. But even
Right.
that, I had to change it in some cases or omit it because people say all sorts of things in emotion. And if I put that in the book, they would stop talking to me.
Yeah.
Really they have a lot of anger or excitement or something. So it's unfair, even if they've said something, to not put it in the right context. So all I'm trying to say is it's really a tricky thing. And the fact that I edited it so much, a lot of the really sharp edges in people's characters, they got a little smoothed out. So that was good, the editing process.
It's like a balance of, I mean, you have to be truthful, but you don't want to invite that sort of feedback,
Yeah,
that.
so the thing that helps is always think of the story. I was always thinking of the narrative.
Hmm.
Okay, this part, this statement, this quote is cast this person in a negative light, but is it really necessary to put that in
Hmm.
if you're looking at the narrative? So that way you can actually have a much more holistic way of approaching this.
Okay. Now I have two questions.
Okay.
Let's go back to Larry. Actually, I write a dating column, so that's
Oh, okay.
this
Okay.
is important. When you mention Larry for the first time, you say uh, Larry had a bigger problem than Chris because he was unavailable.
Yeah.
So I would like to tell you to tell our viewers, how did unavailable Larry became available? What happened there?
Okay, so that's a good story because Larry responded to an ad in the gay newspaper. This is before Grinder or whatever people use now. People had to
Yeah.
actually write letters and submit it to an ad. So there was an Indian person named, let's call him, I don't know what I called him in the book, but Vishal, uh,
Hmm.
who put this ad in. He was just coming out. He was 30 years old. He liked movies. He liked food. And I was 30 at that time, and I was from India. So people
Yeah.
started asking me, "Did you put this ad in?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, why don't you answer it anyway, just to see who this person is?" So I
Yeah.
met this person, Vishal, and we had a good time in the sense just platonic, got along well. But Larry answered the same ad, and this ad generated about 75 replies. So Larry and Vishal ended up dating, and they became, they had a relationship. Um, and so at some point, Vishal invited me and Larry to a disco. And when I met him, it was love at first sight. But
Hmm.
he was unavailable because he was dating my friend.
Yeah.
So what happened finally was that didn't work out. Vishal was looking, he had just come out. He was really looking for someone from India. So that didn't work out. And so after a month, uh, Vishal said, "Okay, it's been a while. Why don't I introduce you as a potential dating partner to Larry?" So it was almost like an arranged marriage. That's what I
Hmm.
like to think, that that's what happened. So we started talking, and then we had a date, and after that, it was just kind of done. Well, not kind of done. We still had many ups and downs, but it worked out.
Thank you. I knew all of this, but I was just reacting because I wanted to view the viewer experience.
Right, right,
It's a
right.
great story, and yeah, I mean, I'm going to tell this to other people as well, that things can work out. And I
Yeah,
mean, you can't. Yeah.
I mean, it helps, if you have a group, a crowd, then okay, as long as you're okay with
Hmm.
people dating after you've broken up with them. So that
Hmm.
was nice of Vishal to say, okay, I'm fine with that.
Now, my last question. You end the book at a point where you say you let go of the urn and the cloth. But do you think this book was a way of preserving your mother?
Yes, absolutely. I think after we are gone, it's only testaments like this that keep you alive in people's memories and in the general population. So I think I was more talking about my duty was over, and so the urn and her ashes and her. I mean the thing on the cloth over the matka was almost like her dupatta, so she was floating away. Uh, so yeah, so your question is that a way of preserving her? And I think
Writing this book.
yes, I think so. The question that I always wonder is how is she going to react in case she was able to read this whole book?
I think she would be so, so, so proud of you because she comes off as, this badass woman, and
Uh,
she was so vocal about all the, little irritations that she used to have. Even that she was so vocal about. And that's, I mean, you can really paint a picture of, just by reading this book, you can paint a picture of Prem Suri, what a person she was.
yeah,
So
she
I
was
think
a
she'd be really proud.
thank you, thank you. She was a character. I mean,
She
she was
was, yeah. And
somebody who
that is why I'm saying this is a Netflix limited series material.
okay, well, do you have any contacts with that would be great. So yeah, she had an amazing life, and it was great that I could, you know, compress it into this, at least the essential parts. Um, I think what happened with my second novel was that I used some of her story in that for the characters,
Hmm.
and she said, "Oh, this is not what happened. This is what happened." And this, so
Yeah.
so I think this is the book that finally. answers her objections and says, okay, this is exactly what happened.
That is great. Thank you so much, Manil, for talking to me. I hope I didn't take much of your time.
Oh, no,
We
this
are.
was great.
This is
Absolutely.
great. This was amazing.
This was great. Thank you.
Thank you.